Hello friends, this is Caleb. I want to let you know that we're doing something very special here. We're having a conversation here on this YouTube channel, and that everyone who's been engaging with me here on YouTube or on Facebook, you're a little bit special. Because most people in this world, unfortunately, they just go along with the way things are. They are told by the mainstream media and by the educational system what to think. They have a basic set of ideas in their head, and they don't really think beyond it. They don't really want to know the truth. They don't really want to dig deeper. They're just kind of satisfied to live their lives with the way things are. But you're not one of those people. If you're watching this video, you're somebody who wants to dig deeper. You want to get to the truth. You know that something is deeply, deeply wrong in Western civilization. And because of that, and because you're digging deeper and you want to know what's going on in the Western world, why is it that things in the United States and things in Western Europe don't seem to be working out the way they once did? You're wondering about what's happening both here at home and around the world. Because of that, you're a little bit special, and you're part of this very, very important conversation. So I applaud you for that, and I appreciate you coming with us here on this journey. I wanted to make this video and talk about economics because, most people, whenever you start talking about economics, their minds just kind of turn off. They say, I can't understand economics. It's too complicated, not something I can really comprehend, and they just assume that they can't understand it. And it's because of that that so many people are not tuned in and not really understanding what's going on in the world right now. If you think about economics, economics is essentially everything that's most important to you. How much do you pay for rent or for your mortgage in order to keep housing and live where you live? How much do you get paid at your job? How about the roads that you take to work? Are they well paved? How about the water in your house? How about the price of food or the price of commodities that you buy? Nothing affects you more than economics. The way people are trained to think about politics in the Western world, they think about, Donald Trump said naughty words, this person's a sexist, this person's a racist, this person is a homophobe, this person's unpatriotic, this person's not really Christian. It's about personalities. Well, personalities is not politics. And if you want to get to the root of politics, and I'm not just talking about political issues and domestic issues, I'm talking about global politics, I'm talking about the relations that are happening in the world right now. If you want to get to the root of all of that, you need to understand economics. And to understand economics, you need to understand that in the United States and in most of the world, we have a political system or an economic system called capitalism. Capitalism is a system in which the major centers of economic power, we're talking about banks, we're talking about factories, we're talking about centers of communication, centers of transportation, we're talking about, about all the major centers, natural resources, oil wells, natural gas, steel production, all of the essentials. These things are owned privately by capitalists. And they own these things, and they operate them for the purpose of making profits for themselves. That's what capitalism is. Capitalism is a system where the means of production, that's what you call the centers of economic power, the factories, the industries, the oil wells, the banks, the means of production are controlled by capitalists and operated to make a profit for them. And it's because of capitalism that so many irrational things can go on, that you can have so many homeless people and so many empty houses. That's what capitalism is. Capitalism is a system in which the economy and society functions for the purpose of making profits for owners. And the Little Red Book, Mao called it profits in command. Frederick Engels said, under capitalism, the means of production only function as preliminary transformation into capital. Capitalism is a society run in order to make profits. That's capitalism. Now, right now, we're in an interesting stage because capitalism is driven by technology. The capitalists are always trying to make technology more efficient. And technology is really the secret of what makes human beings special. If you look at the history of human civilization, you can go back to the time when we were hunter-gatherers living in caves. What made us special was our ability to make tools and our ability to develop technology. Human beings are creative creatures. We tend to live in groups, and we have this ability to develop tools and technology, and that's what sets us apart from animals. That's something unique about our intelligence. That's what makes us human beings. And we developed technology and capitalism, the system of capitalism, which really emerged, roughly 500 years ago. The system of capitalism, that system emerged, and it's constantly driving to advance technology. The capitalist wants to make technology as efficient as possible, so that he can produce as much as he possibly can. He can make so many iPhones, so many books, so many huge layers and pounds of steel, so many tons of cement, and the technology gives him the process to do it cheaper than ever before. He can hire as few people to do it. He can make the people that he does hire more easily replaceable. Technology gives the ability of capitalists to increase the efficiency of production. But there's a problem with that, because the more efficient the capitalist makes production, the fewer people he hires, the lower that he pays the people that he does hire. If he does that, the more efficient technology becomes, the more efficient production is made, the easier it is to make products, the more products you can churn out for less and less costs. If you do that, at the same time, workers are consumers. These people that you're not hiring when you have fewer workers by developing technology, these people that you're paying lower wages because you've made them more easily replaceable and de-skilled their jobs, these people are also the consumers. They're the ones that are going to buy these products that you're producing. And if you lower their wages, pretty soon they can't buy back the products that they produce. And this is called overproduction. And it's the built-in problem of capitalism. And throughout the entire history of capitalism, it's something they've been desperately trying to solve. You want to talk about the Federal Reserve System. You want to talk about government spending, government subsidies. There's a million tricks they've invented to try and solve this basic problem. But when it gets down to it, this problem is unsolvable. As long as production is organized for the purpose of making profits, pretty soon you're going to have crisis of overproduction. Pretty soon, people are not going to be buying back the products they're creating. The market's going to have a glut. That's what they call it, a glut, when there's loads of products that cannot be sold, and the value, the price drops, and pretty soon factories are closing, and people are losing their jobs, and everything is falling apart. And that is the boom-bust cycle of capitalism, driven by this problem of overproduction. So as long as you have capitalism, you're going to have that. But when you have a particularly big leap in technology, then you can have what you call a prolonged crisis of overproduction. And that's what we're experiencing right now. The computer revolution, which is the revolution in technology that took place really since the Second World War to today. It really escalated in the 1980s. This has made production more efficient than ever before. At this point, they can print a book at this point just by pushing a button. They used to have thousands and thousands of people who worked in book binderies. They don't have that anymore. At this point, you can make a book by pushing a button. Amazon create a page, right? I mean, you can go down the line. You have laptops being produced in factories all over the world. You have iPhones that are made in all kinds of different countries. Technology is all over the world. Workers all over the planet are working together to create products. It's more efficient than ever before. You've got artificial intelligence that at this point is eliminating jobs on Wall Street. So there's been this huge, huge leap in the efficiency of production. Technology has just drastically advanced because of the computer revolution. And as a result, we're having a prolonged crisis of overproduction. And it's certainly having an impact in the United States. It's very interesting if you pay attention to the business press. In the lead up to Black Friday, everyone in the business press was talking about how the retail industry in the USA, we're talking about stores, right? Walmart, Best Buy, Target, these kind of stores really needed Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving in the USA, to be a strong shopping day. They needed it very, very badly. They needed people to be piling into all these stores and spending lots of money. And after Black Friday, it was very interesting because you saw all these reports saying that Black Friday was a big success. But if you read a little bit deeper, they said it was a big success online. And that's the reality. All these stores are closing. All the suburban malls are closing down. Walmart has just announced that they are switching to focus on online sales because retail stores are dying. People are ordering online. This is technology eliminating labor. And we're at the point where it's easier for people to just shop online rather than go to some store, and so stores are closing down. Now, you remember the financial crisis, and they said to us, oh, well, the next generation, they're not going to have steel mills to work in. They're not going to have factories to work in, but they will have these retail jobs, the service sector economy. That's what millennials are supposed to be working in. Well, no, these retail jobs are disappearing very, very quickly. You go to, fast food. At this point, they have self-service kiosks. Fewer fast food workers are being hired. Capitalists are doing everything they can to utilize the computer revolution to eliminate jobs. Now, at this point, we can see what's going on domestically in the United States, which is that we're gradually transitioning to what I would call a low-wage police state. Wages are getting lower and lower. It's getting harder and harder for people to, have a job, survive, raise a family. They talk about millennials, how they're not buying cars, they're not buying houses, they're not getting married, they're not having adult lives. Well, you wonder why that is, and it's because they don't have the economic sufficiency to do it. Scary time we're living in. However, at the same time, as we're seeing this kind of problem all across the USA of a significant drop in wages, at this point, the wages are lower than ever. Donald Trump continues to talk about how unemployment is down. Sure, unemployment is down. It's not like it was during, the beginning of the financial crisis in 2008, but wages are lower than ever before. And furthermore, in addition to the low wages, lower than ever before, people are making wages that are far lower than generations in the past. If you add in addition to that, household debt in the United States is at record levels. They are the highest it's been, trillions of dollars of debt. So debt is rising. Now, we've seen reports recently about all throughout Middle America, people's homes are being foreclosed. That was a big part of the, the financial crisis, the housing bubble burst. All throughout Middle America, these homes that have been foreclosed are not being resold to families. They're being resold to Wall Street banks and renting corporations. So basically this American dream of you're going to own your own home, it's starting to fade away. And throughout Middle America, these suburban communities, the houses that are being repurchased by banks. And we're seeing that the average American family, that American dream, is no longer a home-owning family. That's the gradual process that we're seeing. And as this is happening, we're seeing an escalation in police power. We know about the NSA tapping our phones. We know about, there's all kinds of videos on the internet about police brutality and what law enforcement is doing. We know that when Obama was president, he actually certified, his right to assassinate a U.S. citizen without trial with a drone strike. And, there's talk about indefinite detention and all kinds of things have been happening, and our rights are being taken away, but this corresponds with a drop in our standard of living, because as people become more desperate, society becomes more stable, and the government, by necessity, in order to keep order, becomes more authoritarian. So that's one thing that's going on. But another thing that's really important, and a lot of people that are critical of capitalism and critical of all of this, and might get a lot of what I just said don't get, is that we're seeing a phenomenon now called Bonapartism. And that sounds like a fancy word, and people think Bonapartism, and they think about Napoleon. I'm not talking about Napoleon. Karl Marx wrote a book called The 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, and it was about Napoleon's nephew, who became the military dictator of France in 1851. And what was happening was, just like now, at that point in France, there was a crisis in the economy. Wages were low, people were not surviving, advances in industry were causing economic problems. And different sections of the rich and powerful in France were fighting with each other. So Louis Bonaparte was the nephew of, Napoleon, who had been the great, French leader coming out of the Revolution and all of that. He seized power with a group of military leaders, and that was called the Party of Order. And they seized power in France, and they enacted a lot of great reforms. They legalized labor unions, they built railroads, they set up hospitals for poor people, but they also, violently beat down a lot of the rich and powerful people in France on behalf of a small group of rich and powerful people, namely like the financial section, the ones that were in banking, like the richest of the rich. And this is called Bonapartism, because when you have the rate of profit dropping, and when you have a huge leap in technology causing, an economic crisis, and the spending power of the population decreases, and as Marx talked about, the rate of profit drops, when that happens, at that point, the ruling class begin fighting among themselves. And as they fight among themselves, one section will try to violently assert its will over other sections. And what we're seeing in the USA now, with Donald Trump as president, And he's widely hated by most, I would say the majority of the rich and powerful in the USA don't like him, but there's certainly a section of the rich and powerful that really do like him. And there's an attempt at some level of Bonapartism in capitalism right now, where one section of the ruling class is trying to violently assert its will over others. And Trump isn't the only one. I think it's only a matter of time before other figures emerge. And this happens. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he was more of a left-wing, kind of a liberal Bonapartist. He was aligned with the labor unions and such. But, there's Richard Nixon, when there was a political crisis in the USA, not really an economic crisis, but a political crisis in the late 1960s, Richard Nixon came in, and he was like a right-wing Bonapartist. He had a mass movement of these hard hats who went around beating up hippies and others, and he was trying to restore order. When there's chaos in society, one section of the ruling class, one section of the billionaire monopolist capitalists who run the country will try to assert their will over others, and this is called Bonapartism, and that's what we're seeing. And on a global scale, there is a big contradiction, because at one point, especially following the fall of the Soviet Union, the billionaire monopolists who ran the USA had almost unchecked power around the world. They could do what they want. But now there is a rising alternative on the global market. China, with their new Silk Road and their One Belt, One Road initiative, and Russia that's selling oil and natural gas all over the planet, and countries that are aligned with them like Venezuela, like Iran, like Nicaragua. All of these countries are kind of presenting an alternative. And people around the world, countries around the world in places like Africa and Latin America and Eastern Europe, they don't necessarily have to purchase from Wall Street. They're no longer under the sphere of influence necessarily. If the USA is not offering them good trade, they can trade with China or they can trade with Russia. And this is a challenge to the power of Wall Street on the global markets, and it's something that they don't really know how to handle. The Western corporations, based in the USA, based in the London Stock Exchange, France, Germany, other Western countries, are facing a level of competition they haven't faced in a long time. So we're in a prolonged crisis of capitalism. But one thing that is happening, which is very interesting, is this leap in technology that capitalism has created, mainly for the purpose of more efficiently producing products, has also created a leap in the accessibility of information. People can now get on the internet and find facts. People no longer have to rely on the mainstream media the way they once did. And younger people, as a result of wanting to know, like all of you that watch my videos who want to know and want to get beyond all of this, we now have access to information in ways we never had before. So there's a real battle going on, and millions of people in the Western world who are frustrated with the low-wage police state and the conditions that they're facing and the low wages are now at the point where they have the ability to ask questions and get involved. And we're seeing an unprecedented level of involvement. The millennial generation, you can criticize millennials all you want, they are more political than their parents were. I mean, they're more political than their grandparents were, out of necessity, because they are worried about their future. Because of that, they're getting involved in politics. And the activism that we're seeing now from millennials is not like 1960s activism. It's not this kind of bohemian protest, the society's unfair, man, I'm going to drop out, drugs and all that. It's a little different. Millennials are concerned about the future of their country and the future of the world. And they want to get involved, and they're kind of taking responsibility for the world that is kind of being handed over to them. So it's a very interesting situation that we're living in. Capitalism is in a crisis, and people are getting involved. And ultimately, my analysis and my understanding is that we do need socialism. We need a system in which the banks, factories, and industries are not operating to make profits, but are rather operating to serve public good. Now, that doesn't mean we need a Soviet model. I don't think the government should run, restaurants. I don't think the government should run hotels. But I do think we need a healthcare system that is designed to serve public good and not make profits for insurance companies. I do think that the steel industry and the oil wells and the centers of economic power, the definitive, giants, the commanding heights of the economy should be controlled by the public. That's what I believe, and I think that is a good alternative, and I don't think that it's completely failed. I think if you look at, the Soviet Union, obviously their system had a lot of problems. They ultimately collapsed, but before they collapsed, they took a very poor country. Russia in 1917 was a really, really poor country and made it a world industrial power. They were the first country in outer space. They defeated the Nazis and Hitler. They were producing steel at record levels. They invented the AK-47 rifle. If you look at China, China very much has a socialist economy. There's a lot of capitalism and a lot of private corporations, but everything that matters is controlled by the state. The steel industry is controlled by the state. Banking is controlled by the state. The world's largest telecommunications manufacturer, Huawei, is a state-controlled corporation in essence. And even though there's a lot of capitalism in China, the economy doesn't function for the purpose of making profits. In China, the economy is controlled by the state and forced to work for the good of the country, not in the interest of private capitalists. And that is a difference. And that's what is ultimately going to have to emerge. We are going to have to get beyond capitalism in the Western world. We're going to have to reorganize the economy so that it serves the people and isn't centered around profits. We're going to need a planned economy in the Western world. And I think that people are coming to this understanding. There's all this talk about socialism nowadays. Most people don't really understand what socialism is. They think it's the post office or free health care or the government giving people free stuff. But no, socialism is a planned economy. It's the economy working for the good of the people and for the public good, not in the interests of profit. And I think we are going to eventually see socialism emerge in the Western world. But it's going to be a struggle because some of the richest and most powerful people in the world are going to fight against it because they want to preserve their profits. So we're really seeing the death agony of capitalism. We cannot continue with capitalism. The computer revolution has made capitalism impractical. So the ruling class are fighting among each other. The rate of profits is dropping. The wages are dropping. There's a low-wage police state. All kinds of things are developing. And you and me here on YouTube and on Facebook, we're along for the ride. It's an exciting ride. We're living in exciting times. And let's ride together. Let's do it together. Let's be part of understanding the world together. Let's not let them control our minds. Let's have a conversation here. And let's talk about how the people in the Western world are getting tired of the conditions and starting to wake up and realize what's behind them. We're having a conversation here, and it's a very important conversation. I'm glad you're part of it. I'm glad I'm part of it. But more people need to be part of it. The world is changing. We're living in some very exciting times. People are going to look back, 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now. They're going to look back at what was going on in this very moment, and they're going to think it was decisive. I mean, this is a turning point. You talk about the Renaissance that took place at one point. You talk about, the Great Awakenings that we had here in U.S. history. You talk about some of the very definitive moments that have happened in world history. We're at one of those moments right now. I am convinced that we are living in a decisive moment in the history of human civilization, and some very exciting things are happening. But you're not going to hear about them on mainstream media. So you got to tune into this YouTube channel. You got to keep involved and be in touch with the work that's happening here because we are doing something very, very exciting here. You're part of it. I'm part of it. We're all part of it together. Thank you.